morning, everybody. It's great to be here. As was noted, I have the longest title in state government. I'm the Ombudsman for individuals with intellectual or developmental disabilities and their families. It's a brand new position, and my reason for being here today is really twofold. One is to introduce myself and introduce the office, and second is to really just listen and learn as much as I can. It's something I've been trying to do as much as possible, and it's particularly important because it is a new office. And so it's important for me to get out and meet with as many folks as possible, let them know what's available through our office, and also for me to, on the opposite end, sort of go out there and learn all the resources that exist throughout the state. So I'm just going to give you a little background about the office, a little background about myself. I'll keep an eye on you to make sure you don't stand up while I'm talking. And then that'll be it. And then I'll be here through the rest of the day. So this office was created by the New Jersey State Legislature in December of 2017. It was signed into law by Governor Christie in January of 2018, and I was appointed by Governor Murphy in April of 2018. So I've been on the job about 10 months. It's a brand new office, and it's one that was born out of the recognition that folks with intellectual developmental disabilities often don't have the capacity to navigate the system and to advocate for themselves. Two, that families who are very much involved are often overwhelmed. And three, that the system is really way too confusing. And so they created this office. So far I'm a staff of one, hoping to become a staff of 2 or 3 over the next year or so. But it's really an exciting opportunity because it really is a recognition at the highest levels of our government that this is important. We need to get this right. That this population, particularly folks with disabilities more generally, but this population in particular needs a little more attention. We need to make sure that they get the services and supports they need. In that context, the law really sets out a set of responsibilities for the office, but I've put them into 3 buckets. One is I work with individuals and families to help them navigate the system, to help make sure that they get the services and supports they need. And what that often means is not like a support coordinator, it's more like working with families and individuals when they run into a brick wall or they feel like they don't know where to turn or they're just a little confused about the system. My job is to try to help them connect with the resources, both in government and at all levels of government, but also in nonprofits and with providers, trying to just point them in the right direction and make those connections. I also have the opportunity to work with families, particularly when they get a decision that they don't like or they just feel like something, they got a denial of a service, to try to help sort of mitigate that and try to work with both sides, if you will, to resolve that. The second thing is, and very excitingly, I get to work with individuals and families to look for ways to improve the system. So there can be small things, that can be large things, that could be within a particular department, that could be across sort of the whole system, breaking down silos, what have you. But an opportunity to really step back and look at the system with individuals and families and look for ways to improve it, make it more accessible, and make it more user-friendly. And third, and sort of overriding all this, is really to help make sure that the voice of the individuals and the voice of families is heard, and that it's heard in a meaningful way, not just on decisions that affect them directly, but also as we look at making system-wide changes and new policies and stuff, to making sure that there's a seat at the table for individuals and families. It's an independent office, which is good. I'm not within any particular department. I'm technically I'm in but not of Treasury, which means I get my email and my paycheck from the Treasury Department. But otherwise, I'm independent, and that's important for 2 reasons. One is because if you're inside a department, you're sort of like hamstrung a little bit, sort of tied, restricted in what you can do because you're within a particular department. So I don't have that. I have much more flexibility. Second, and very importantly, it gives a system-wide perspective to this office, because the issues that affect folks with disabilities, like issues that affect all of us, don't just reside in the Department of Human Services or the Department of Children and Families. It's education, it's labor, it's emergency management, it's health, it's the whole ball of wax. And so being independent allows me to have that system-wide perspective. So I started last April, and one of the requirements of my job is to do an annual report that goes to the governor, it goes to the legislature, it goes to the Commissioner of Human Services and the Commissioner of Children and Families. And so I'm just finalizing that report for last year, for 2018. And so I can tell you that just in the first 8.5 months of this job, I had the opportunity to meet with over 150 families and connect with them, which at first wasn't easy because no one knew the office existed. So it was going to events like this, it was passing out my business cards, which I'll do later, and it was really trying to connect with folks all throughout the state. Second, I've had an opportunity to meet with and work with over half of the state legislators, which I think is important because a lot of times they're a point of entry for folks that are looking for some direction, looking for some help. And so working with state legislators, assemblymen, senators, and their staff, I think is a good way to sort of help connect some of the dots. Similarly, I've begun working very closely with county disability directors. Again, they tend to be a point of entry into the system, if you will, for a lot of families and individuals. And so connecting with them and helping make sure those dots are connected, I think is important too. I've reached out and worked with providers, schools. I accept basically any invitation I get because it helps me to understand the system as a whole, and it also makes me more of a resource for families. Again, when they come to me, I can point them in a direction and connect them with somebody, again, whether it's in government or the nonprofit or education world. But you know, the office is set up that I deal with folks across the whole lifespan. So I deal with families with children, I deal with families with adult children, I deal with all, you know, the whole spectrum, if you will, of intellectual and developmental disability. So it's a broad portfolio, particularly for one person. But it's great, and it allows me really to see in a holistic way sort of what's working and what's not working. And you know, I've worked on a whole bunch of issues, including the transitions issue, which is actually one of my focus issues I've been focusing on. Started conversations already with the Department of Human Services and Children and Families, but also the Department of Education, Department of Labor, trying to sort of bring everybody to the table. And that's going to be something that we're going to be probably working on as administration, trying to bring everybody to the table. Because to me, you know, the transition issue, transition from childhood to adulthood, is really one of the low-hanging fruits, if you will, and one of the most important issues, because it affects every family. Because every child with an intellectual developmental disability becomes an adult with an intellectual and developmental disability. And so we know that transition is going to happen, and so to the extent we can make it seamless is important. But as we all know, and it was suggested by the last speaker, is there are two very different systems. And you know, up to 21, it's an entitlement. You know, a lot of times families get those services and supports through the school system, some through the Department of Children and Families. But when you get to 21, you know, the bad news is it's a whole different system and it's not an entitlement anymore. The good news is there are a lot of services, there are a lot of supports, a lot of resources. The idea that we need to do is just make sure everybody's connected and we help make that transition as seamless as possible. I came to this position having worked many years on disability issues, both professionally as well as personally. Like a lot of folks I come to because I have disability in my family. But it was the work I did, I guess most recently over the last 10 years, was up in Bergen County. I used to be mayor and councilman up in Bridgewood. And so we did a lot of work. We set up a disability committee locally, worked closely with families, worked closely with the school system, been involved in different boards, the Heightened Independence of Progress up in Bergen and Hudson County, and did a lot of that. But again, I came to it because I have it in my family. In my case, I'm a sibling. All three of my siblings have had a mix of disabilities and healthcare challenges. And it's really through their experiences that I've learned everything and become passionate about it. That's particularly true. I had a sister who had developmental disabilities. As a child, she was a few years older than me. As a child, you know, she had the cognitive, the learning disabilities, the behavioral issues. And as she got older, she also started to have manifested in some physical challenges. Eventually, she lost the ability to walk, so she became quadriplegic. She required a feeding tube, trach, sort of the whole 9 yards. And so it was really through her experience in her life and my mom as her caretaker that I learned a lot about disability. I learned the importance of direct support professionals. I learned about the anxiety families feel when they get some services, but they need more, but they're afraid to advocate for it because they feel like they're in a precarious position. I learned a lot through that. And then, you know, my mom and sister had moved down to Florida a few years back, and as my mom was aging, me being one of the healthy ones in our family, I started to look up here to bring my sister back up here, what that would entail. And so I started to learn a little bit about the DDD system myself, from firsthand experience. But as would have it, in June of 2017, my mom passed away. 3 days later, my sister passed away. And it was a shock to us because my sister was nonverbal at the time of her passing, and we didn't know if she knew my mom had died. We didn't know how to tell her, and it was a shock. And on the one hand, it was devastating to us. On the other hand, it was beautiful, and it really underscored to me and for me understanding that there really is a bond between parents and children. It's an important one. It's something somewhat inexplicable at times. We couldn't make heads or tails of it. But I share that story often when I speak because I think it's important for people to understand my perspective, where I'm coming from. But equally important, I think it's important for folks to know that this is why the governor appointed me to this job. He wanted somebody who sort of spoke the same language as families, who sort of got that sense of urgency that families feel. That is, realizes that this is 24/7, and there are no weekends, and so to me, this is a labor of love. These are hard issues we work on, but it's rewarding also when we're able to actually help someone. And so with that, again, I just wanted to sort of introduce myself, introduce the office. I'm going to be here all day, but I'm really looking forward to listening, learning, and to meeting all of you going forward. Thank you, Shane.